no one is going to school anymore for 4 years and thinking that they know everything for the next 40 in their jobs, and that includes the top suite, or it should. And if it doesn't, there's big problems.
People before machines.
Conversations on the chaos of factory automation from Monday morning to the very near future.
An Eclipse podcast.
Welcome to People Before Machines. Conversations on the chaos of factory automation from Monday morning to the very near future. I'm Amanda Cupido, a speaker, author, and entrepreneur with a passion for the intersection of technology and humanity. This episode, we're discussing factory bottlenecks and getting to the bottom of who or what is to blame. I'm joined by one of the top 100 influencers for Industry 4.0, Mike Nager. He is the Solution Center Director for Festo Didactic and is known for bringing unique insights from his experience inside over 500 manufacturing facilities. As an electrical engineer and author of multiple books, including All About Smart Manufacturing and The Smart Student's Guide to Smart Manufacturing, he has established himself as a leading voice in, you guessed it, smart manufacturing transformation and workforce development. Thanks so much for being here, Mike.
Oh, thank you, Amanda, for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Exciting topic, and it's great to get the word out.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the platform.
Well, your experience bridges technical and human elements of modern manufacturing, which is why I'm really excited to talk to you about this and dig into whether it's humans or digital systems that are causing bottlenecks in Industry 4.0. So right out of the gate, what do you think?
You're starting off hot. So let's just dive right into it. So I would say it's not an either or situation. So I would not place the blame solely on the technology side of that equation, and nor would I place it on the human side. I think it's how the humans and the people are interacting with technology, and the challenge is that it's changing so quickly. It's hard to keep up with those changes and those demands. So I don't place blame on humans or on the technology, but how do we integrate both of them? Because it's going to be very critical moving forward that we have the ability to use these technologies in a great way. Right.
So when we talk about that integration piece, let's first then talk about the human side of that equation. Is it outdated mindsets that's holding people back, or what would you say on the human side is preventing them from keeping up with the speed and being able to work seamlessly?
Yeah, a large part of it is just the pace. So, in the last 2 years, artificial intelligence, machine learning has exploded into the main public. It's no longer even, a side institution. And how does an organization make sure its employees have the right skill sets and the right knowledge to be able to harness these new powers? And that's where the challenge is, because organizational charts have been around for a long time. They tend to be very static in how they are constructed, and the ability to make a very agile human workforce hasn't been the priority up until this point. And I think that's the real challenge. How do we, from an organizational standpoint, shift our organization to one of continuous learning, fast deployments, and cover all the stakeholders? So the company still has to make a profit while it's figuring all this out. Employees need to have a sense of security that they're not going to be replaced either by a piece of technology or by a person that has a little bit more familiarity with that technology, and that they're in it for the long haul. So, it always comes down to people. That's the bottom line, and that's what we're experiencing today, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll talk more about the technology side of things later, but I want to dig in onto the people side of things. So when you want to give people that sense of security, it's hard when we all know AI learns faster, is more cost effective, can help with efficiency and the bottom line. So how do you tell people and make them believe they're worth upskilling, reskilling, investing in? And that goes for both, the top floor and the factory floor.
Yeah, so people are pretty astute. They see what's happening in their day-to-day work life. So if they are being invited to upskilling training seminars, they're given the time, 1 week or 2 weeks a year solely dedicated to keeping their profession and keeping their skills up to date. Those actions are a lot more powerful than any words are going to be, from a stockholder meeting or from a chairperson. So it's really about rolling up the sleeves and saying, okay, this is the situation that we're in, and we're only going to win together. So everyone has to be, brought up to speed. And by the way, I talk a lot about the skills gap and learning technical skills and knowledge. And a lot of times it's at the plant floor level, it's at the machine operator or the engineering level. The same challenges are hitting the executive suite right now. People that are CEOs, CFOs, directors, they are all being challenged in a very similar manner. So we got to keep that in mind, that it's a company wide phenomenon. It's not just at the lower levels of the organizational structure.
And what advice would you have for those leaders, whether they have to advocate for themselves within the organization, or do you recommend they go external to do some of their own upskilling?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, the further you are up in the hierarchy, you do have the privilege of being able to determine, a little bit more of your direction as an individual. And you have to set the tone right off the start that, okay, I'm a great CEO of a great company and have a lot of accolades, but, this AI thing is something completely new. And I'm going to go to a forum or to a conference and learn how we can most impactfully bring that into our organization and allow the people that are working in the organization to be part of that journey. So those top positions have a lot of attention on them. So it's super important to show that type of dedication, because no one is going to school anymore for 4 years and thinking that they know everything for the next 40 in their jobs. And that includes the top suite, or it should. And if it doesn't, there's big problems.
Right.
The top jobs are supposed to set the direction for the entire company. It's not supposed to be a trickle up type of thing, like, oh, we want to bring this technology into the plant floor and we got to convince our bosses and the CEO that we need some IoT sensors. It should be the opposite way around, right? And I don't see that very often, to be quite blunt. There's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah. And what about emotional intelligence, humility, these aspects that we as humans like to say, well, we've got this over AI? Do you find that these kinds of qualities are something that we should be focusing on as a differentiator and really leading upon as we try to find our place in all of this?
Yeah, Amanda, you bring up a great point. So, if you look at the big picture, we have automation that is doing more jobs. And in the terms of physical jobs, robots and cobots and automated guided vehicles are taking over a lot of those physical jobs. When we talk about mental jobs, think of things like accounting and finance and moving figures from one form to another, from Excel to SAP, that is being taken over by AI. So the idea is that all repetitive tasks, whether physical or mental, are probably going to be automated sooner or later. Some of the easier ones will be sooner, some of the more difficult ones will be later, but that is the clear path that it's going on. So if you have humans now in the mix, in the workforce, and they're no longer expected to act as a robot, either physically or mentally, then all these soft skills that you mentioned come to the forefront, because teams are going to be formed in thinking about more of the why questions than the how questions. The how questions are going to be automated, right? How do you get this widget to do it? How do you move these figures from one software platform to another will be automated. But forming that effective teamwork to figure out why you should be doing something, why you should change direction, why the company should take a risk in a certain area requires all those skills that you just mentioned. In fact, they're so important. I don't know if you're familiar with the manufacturing institutes in the US. There's 17 manufacturing institutes. One of them is called America Makes, and they think that the term soft skills should be renamed to durable skills. And they have on their website a nice pinwheel of about 8 different subject areas of what we normally would call soft skills, things like leadership, emotional maturity, cultural awareness, all these kind of big buckets. And they've split them down into maybe 100 very precise soft skills, if you want to use the old terminology, that people need to develop. So that's definitely something to look into if you're interested in this. The soft skills, ironically, are the things that are becoming more important as the technology progresses, right?
It's fascinating. And I wonder how education institutions will now follow this. Like, are we going to have degrees in humility? Because that's what people are going to be hired
Right.
for.
Right. I did read something that was funny, for years, the smartest people in the world, in the country, were advising young people, go into coding, learn about, coding computers. Well, that's like one of the first things that's being replaced by AI now is those coding skills. But, how do you prompt an AI to get the correct output? Maybe there's some English major that really knows the command of language and knows how the structure works, will have the highest paid skills in the future. It's very ironic.
It is. Yeah. I taught a course for communicators, teaching them how to use generative AI. And part of their homework was to also show how did they prompt, how did they revise, and then what was the final answer. And so showing that kind of workflow, like there's, a new way of learning and marking and grading now in education on that front. So I agree with everything you're saying. And I'm excited. These are the kinds of things I'm really looking forward to seeing. How does it evolve? And what a neat time to be alive to witness it.
Yeah, it certainly is exciting. I mean, I've been watching the space for years. I've been in the manufacturing marketplace for 25 years plus now.
Right.
And there was pretty steady progress all during that time. But the last 5 years, I mean, things have really noticeably exploded on the technology forefront, especially.
Leaps and bounds, I'm sure. Let's talk about the capabilities of machines as a whole, though. We've been talking a lot on the human side, so let's flip over now to the machine side. Do you think that we're overestimating the capabilities of machines as we start to plan and look ahead into the future on these sorts of things?
Yeah, there is a little bit of that going on. People that are outside the factory, might have one of two extreme positions when they think about it, if they think about it at all. We have a great awareness gap in this country about manufacturing right now. But if they did think about it, they might think about dirty, dangerous, and dull types of positions and atmospheres and environments. Or they might think it's something like there's no people walking around and everything is automated and you got robots on the floor and on the ceiling feeding machines that do everything themselves. And for most places, that is not the case. There's some technology, of course. We know that's increasing, across the board, and it will continue to do it. But machines jam, robots get lost. These things will improve over time. But you need people to know, that big picture why question again of why we want this production run to go smoothly and, figure out how to do it. So, and by the way, most manufacturers, are not the large ones that you might think of, off the top of your head. They're going to be 10 and 20 and 50 person enterprises that are the majority of the manufacturing operations in the US and across the world. And there's a lot of need for smart, skilled people inside those types of companies.
Right. And I mean, you have such a connection to younger people who are coming into the industry. What does it take to really change the stereotypes that are around it? And you talk about a lack of awareness. Like, how do we increase that awareness?
Yeah. So on one side, the industry itself is starting to do a good job in addressing that. The first week of October is Manufacturing Week, and that is Manufacturing Month in the United States. And that's where manufacturers are encouraged to open their doors to the public and to invite people in, including students, and maybe including younger students, maybe, people that are 8, 9, 10 years old, 11, 12, 13 years old, into the facility, because a manufacturing operation typically isn't on Main Street, with glass windows that when you walk by, you can see it. It's not in the local mall. If you're walking down the aisle, you can look in. It's off the side of the highway in an industrial zoned park. Maybe it's a steel-sided building, few windows. You pass by, maybe you notice it, but you don't understand what is going on inside unless you get to see it. And that's what Manufacturing Week is trying to encourage, is to people to open up those doors. The books I wrote for students and for teachers and for kids to talk about manufacturing is kind of like a virtual window into that manufacturing operation. So if you can't get out and see one, maybe you'll pick up a book, and maybe, verbally you'll be able to get a peek of what's inside and be surprised that, it sounds pretty cool to do something like that as a career or a job.
I love that. And October is also Manufacturing Month in Canada too. So this is obviously a wider spread phenomenon that's helping to reframe it. And, for even these books for kids and for younger folks, it's nice, even if they're not going to pursue that as an industry, but even if they're talking about their parents that work in those environments, that they're talking about it differently. So it's a great recommendation.
Yeah. It's great to keep in mind, that manufacturing still is one of the prime drivers of real growth and wealth, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of other professions and industries will take wealth and manipulate it and, change it and do things, with it. But the manufacturing industry actually creates wealth. It takes raw materials and it makes them into something that is more valuable and more useful and can do other things.
Right.
So that's why governments are always so keen to have a manufacturing facility move into their locale, because they know that it's going to spawn this wealth, and it's going to spawn a lot of service businesses and suppliers around it. So you could end up, working in some way in manufacturing, no matter what your profession is.
Right.
Whether it's it's just not engineers and toolists and machinists. It's accountants and finance and HR. The whole gamut of professions feeds off this wealth creation that manufacturing offers.
Yeah.
And by the way, we did see that. Yeah, it's a whole ecosystem, and we saw that in a negative way, in the 1990s, when we started to offshore a lot of manufacturing out of North America to other areas that had less expensive labor rates.
Mm-hmm.
And 30 years later, you go back to those places that did bring manufacturing in, and you can see tremendous wealth generation there. And not to take away from any of those places, it's great. But if you visit the towns that in North America that lost that, you see, quite the opposite. It's termed the Rust Belt in the U.S.
Yeah.
Right, where everything is not so great. So I think it's intuitively obvious now to everyone, which it was not 10 years ago, that manufacturing is really important to have, and it's important to have locally.
And hopefully some of these reshoring efforts that I know so many organizations are prioritizing might help in shifting this once again. But as we continue to talk about the identity and awareness, I think it's interesting to see how so many manufacturers are still holding on to this, quote, blue collar identity. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I just think it's momentum, for 100 years, the white collar, blue collar divide kind of had like a clear meaning and kind of made sense. And, organizations were built around it. Unions were built around that definition in a large part. And, everything is shifting. So the Industry 4.0, it's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And when that happens, it's just not technology. Everything is supposed to change, quite a bit. And I think we're just starting to see that start now, especially with the AI becoming so popular and so powerful so fast, that the way that you did business in the past no longer applies in the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
So, when you see, someone working on the plant floor that knows how to program a robot and debug a programmable logic controller and adjust a sensor and and make sure the database is up to date, so SAP can run the number. That does not sound like what, you would call a blue collar job of the past.
Right.
Right. It it doesn't sound like a white collar job. So I think we'd be best just to eliminate that distinction altogether. Be like, you know what? We're employees of this company and we have different jobs to do. There's no different class.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned labor unions, so I just want to follow up on that note because I think it's interesting to start imagining what their role is as we look ahead to the future where, we might have workers that are an algorithm. So what will be the role of labor unions, you think?
Yeah. So, there's a great challenge around that because, the guilds, the unions came up from the guilds that were very tied to a specific technology. And the demand for a lot of positions now is not within the vertical silo of one of these subjects. It's just not mechanical, it's just not plumbing, it's just not electrical, it's just not IT. It's a combination of it. So hopefully, there'll be movement there about how to rethink that whole classification of people because it's going to get messier, not easier in the future, I fear.
Yeah. And if we continue down this hypothetical now, as we imagine parts of the workforce being more tech-based or code or algorithms, what do you think the implications will be for safety culture?
Oh, yeah. So, safety is something that extremely important. That, a whole government organization was developed in the 1970s in the U.S. called OSHA, just because the track record and the accidents that happened a lot of times in manufacturing plants were so bad that action had to be taken, from a legal standpoint. That is only going to increase. So machine safety is something that I'm involved in personally on the skills training side. It's something that we encourage our university and college clients to look into putting into their curriculum because it's that important. And harmonizing between North America and Europe and Asia, all these different standards, that's just a full-time job in itself.
All right. So as we continue looking into the future here, our crystal ball, do you think we'll ever have factories that run themselves?
The lights out factory. Yes. So when I started working around 1990, we heard that term quite a bit. And the joke is that the lights off factory is 10 years from being reality.
Always.
And always will be.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, I mean, you see some of these tasks and positions and jobs being replaced. And really, we shouldn't be surprised about that. In the 1960s and 1970s, there was hundreds of thousands of people that were telephone operators that manually connected phone calls together. And now that is completely automated. And no one really wants to do those types of positions. No one's clamoring to be a switchboard operator. And, the same with stacking bricks and palletizing heavy things. Yes, we've thrown a lot of people at that type of job. But, is that something that people really want to do? And I would say no, we have to automate that as much as possible.
All right. I'm going to leave you with a curveball question before we wrap up today. So if you had to choose between a highly skilled human operator or a slightly unpredictable AI with 10x output, what would you choose?
Oh my gosh, some question. Well, there's still nothing more flexible in the world than a human being.
Yeah.
The ability to absorb new information, to be able to react, even some mechanical movements, being able to figure out how to do things very, very quickly. It's still in the human realm. So I'm on side people. I think we've got to keep people, foremost in front of this and not lose sight of that. I think it's still a little bit of science fiction to imagine a world where everything is running, without our help. Maybe someday, but I don't think, in my work career lifetime, it's going to be.
I agree. Well, thanks so much, Mike. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to People Before Machines, conversations on the chaos of factory automation, powered by Eclipse. We're here to challenge the status quo in factory automation because machines don't build factories, people do. The technical producer for this podcast is Ryan Denninger. I'm Amanda Cupido. If you got something out of today's episode, we'd love it if you share it with a teammate, a plant leader, or anyone who is tired of the automation echo chamber. Be sure to follow this podcast for real talk, bold questions, and sharp insights. And remember, the future isn't fully automated. It's people-powered. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to People Before Machines.
Dialogues on the chaos of factory automation.
For past podcast episodes, search People Before Machines on Spotify, YouTube, or visit eclipseautomation.com.